board in the great shrew escapade.
Oh,
jeez.
It's right out there ready to go. I wouldn't forget. The board in the great shrew escapade.
Okay.
you can
Fine.
exit out of that.
You're live. Okay.
Man, I could have slept 10 more minutes.
I know.
I'm gonna text him the number. Will that help him so he can just click on it?
Oh, Jesus.
No.
Yeah, so we are live officially. So I don't know, Joe, if you just want to get started and
Yeah, I mean, there's 4 of us here, so I guess we can technically get started and hope that the others can resolve their technical difficulties here.
right.
So what are we at? 8:11, we'll call the meeting to order. Start with the director's report.
All right, good morning, everyone. Just want to thank you for accommodating Zoom this morning. Hopefully in December, we will be back to normal and back to in-person meetings. So we sent out our packet last Friday, including my executive director's report. I want to note that I restructured it to match our strategic priorities. So hopefully that's something that we will continue to integrate into our reports and maybe even our agenda moving forward, but we'll talk more about the strategic planning stuff later. So some highlights for October. We certainly had a really busy and exciting month with a lot of stuff happening. We've continued to work with the Lewis County Development Corporation on a number of projects this past month. Some exciting things happening there, and we'll get into that later in the meeting as well. We also hosted 2 events, 2 really successful events in October. The first one was the Winter Industry Roundtable event that we hosted at Osceola Ski and Sport. We had about approximately 15-ish in person and maybe about 10 virtually. It was a really great discussion for the tourism, winter tourism type businesses, and just how do we get through the winter? How do we get through the winter during a pandemic? We left that event with a to-do list in partnership with the chamber that we are currently working and implementing some of those ideas that came out of that meeting. One of those ideas was a countywide shop local campaign. Jenna has been working on marketing and creating essentially a media kit for any business or entity to use throughout the holidays and beyond. The intent of the shop local campaign is just that. We want to really encourage people that, as the winter hits and as the holidays come around, to really think about purchasing gifts and continuing to buy local. We did purchase with an AmeriQ sponsorship 100 yard signs with the design that Jenna came up with. So we're going to be putting those signs all over Lewis County. So if you're interested in one of those, please let us know and we can get you a sign. We will also have a press release that we'll send out very soon, so you guys can see all the details on that. We also hosted a Center for Businesses in Transition webinar in October. It was a virtual panel discussion with a couple of local entrepreneurs who have transitioned in or out of local businesses And we brought in Ian Gilbert, who is an attorney and a legislator who's very experienced in business transitions. We had about 25 people on that webinar. And then lastly, we continue to work with solar developers on proposed sites here in Lewis County. This past month, we met with the developers with National Grid Renewables, which previously was Geronimo. They have 2 100 megawatt projects proposed here in Lewis County, in the town of New Bremen and Croghan, in the town of Wilna and Jefferson County. So we continue to work with developers and continue to work through our countywide solar process as well. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. So the next item, and it looks like Tom has been able to join us.
Yeah, I made it.
Hi, Tom.
So not to put you
Hi.
on the spot, Tom, but the next thing on the list is committee reports. I don't know if there's anything from the.
Okay, our finance committee didn't meet, so I guess I'd refer everything to Cheyenne.
We didn't have any committees this past month.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so now we'll move on. So Jenna sent out the meetings from the October board meeting last Friday, as well as the financials. So did everyone get a chance to review the meeting minutes?
Hey, Joe, we missed correspondence.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, I totally missed that.
That's okay. So hopefully you all were able to take a look at the letter we received. This is, I think, just a concerned citizen. They saw the news about the $9 million grant that Jefferson County IDA received for the new Y building and project in Watertown. This was a Department of Defense grant, and it was offered to all 3 counties. But the big criteria with this grant was that whatever project you were applying for, it had to impact like at least 50% of military families living in your community. So Lewis County wouldn't have ever qualified for this grant. And obviously Jefferson County was able to qualify for this grant. So I think this is someone who uses double play services and is very pleased with double play. And she's just urging that we as economic development and the Chamber of Commerce and the county should be continuing to support double play. We have been in conversations with the organization for a number of years now. Previously, they've had plans laid out for a new build in Lowville. More recently, because of the pandemic, they've switched their project plan and they're actually planning on utilizing a current building. That's all that I can say right now. So they have kind of switched their plans, but I actually just talked with the executive director 2 days ago in regard to this project. So I'm not sure if you guys have any other thoughts on this, but I do have a draft letter started and I wanted to send something back to her, thanking her for, getting in touch with us. And I wanted to let her know how we have supported double play and continue to support them into the future.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it is good to follow up. And I guess the one thing, and this to me ties back into our strategic planning process and what our goals are, because her last sentence frankly kind of bothered me a little bit. It says, I question why the people in power can only think of businesses and not think of the citizens. And to me, that couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
And I think the work we're doing speaks to that on 2 fronts. I mean, quality life for citizens is the fact is reliant on having successful businesses, but not only that, we I think in economic development we spend a lot of time looking at quality of life and the citizens of the county. So I just want to, and I think our strategic plan highlights our recognition and our sincerity around that. So I just think that's a message we need to continue to push forward.
Absolutely.
All right, sorry, the top of the agenda, I got director's report and privilege of the floor mixed up there. So anyways, we're back to items for approval. So back to the October meeting minutes. Were there any comments on those? Do we have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Darlene, a second.
I'll second it.
Ron, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Motion carries. Thank you. September financials from Cheyenne.
Yeah, I think we've got highlighted on the profit and loss just a couple lines that I wanted to speak to. One of them being contract revenue. That's kind of a hit or miss as to exactly the timing of different contract revenue we've got coming in. So that's Centers for Business and Transition revenue for admin through ANCA, Cdbg admin, and Lcdc admin basically fall under that category. County money falls under that category too. Obviously that 180,000, it wasn't the miss in September, but we show 0 for September, but we're tracking fine for the year. And that 0, just I wanted to speak to that a little bit. Investment income, that shortfall was basically driven by SKU paying a little late. Their payment hit just into October. So, and because they've got that huge equipment installment sale, that's a huge piece of that investment income each month. Under agency expense, that was kind of a triple whammy there. Our audit was delayed a little bit. So the payment was delayed. That would have been budgeted for August and it hit in September instead. So that's a big chunk of that overspend. Legal is tracking a little high this year, but that's to be expected with the projects we've taken on. And I am looking at our legal, what I've categorized as legal, because some of that I think we could recategorize as project expense or consulting. Some of that spend has been on consulting for our UTEP. So is that consulting or is that legal? We just kind of need to make a call there and show that where we want to show it. And then under occupancy, we had to pay our first and last month rent there, as well as our get out of jail free for Buckingham. So that's why that tracked a little high. Any questions on the profit and loss? Kevin, I'm glad you appreciate that. On the balance sheet, if you want to go to the next one, we do show a $55,000 reduction in our checking and savings. That's that 22, a big chunk of that anyway, is the Lionsdale pilot from 2019. They hadn't cashed their check. We finally got them to tell us that they lost the check. It took a long time to even get a response. So we finally issued them a new check and they cashed it. Other than that, was just normal spending. And the accounts payable line, you'll see that's dropped significantly too. Again, that's that Lionsdale that finally got cashed. Any questions on that? All right. You've got our monthly expenditures too, which normally we wouldn't be reviewing at our board meeting, but since we didn't have a committee meeting, I've put that in the packet as well. And really nothing significant besides that, the audit and the Lionsdale spend on that.
Thank you. Any questions? If there's no questions, could we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Tom, a second.
I'll second it.
Ron, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next is also included in the packet was a quote from North Country CPAs, and I don't know, Cheyenne or Brittany, do you want to update?
We would have also reviewed this in our finance committee, but since we didn't have one, we're reviewing it now. If you can recall, over the summer, we entered into a contract with North Country CPAs to help us with our daily bookkeeping and payroll services during Cheyenne's leave. Once Cheyenne came back, we kind of assessed what was necessary and what we could keep in-house and what we could still contract with North Country CPAs. We determined that with the bookkeeping, it was kind of redundant work to have the accountants cut our checks and enter in information into QuickBooks, because Cheyenne would still have to go back into QuickBooks and fix what account it might be. And so it was kind of redundant. So we're bringing that part back in-house, but we still want to continue a contract with Emily Philippe for our payroll services. So that quote for the year was $1930. And I think that contract is what we definitely want to move forward with. We did receive some quotes on just hourly rates for just general QuickBooks help. Cheyenne's worked really hard to, worked really hard to clean up our QuickBooks, and there's still some ongoing questions that she might have that North Country CPAs could help us with. And then they gave us a quote for prepared financial statements. That was just a question of whether or not we wanted our auditors to do those financial statements for us or have North Country CPAs. So I think
that went back to our conversation at the audit committee meeting and then at the board meeting about that significant quote unquote deficiency in our financials, that our auditor was preparing the financials. And so we sought a quote from North Country CPAs just so that we could speak to whether it's cost prohibitive really to have an outside firm do that.
So we kind of want to maybe wait on that part of it.
Yeah, I would say wait on that part of it. And just as Brittany and I started looking at the budget for next year, believe it or not, even though our budget year is June 1, we started looking at it because it needs to be submitted by the end of February, and really kind of looking at the channels of funding that we have, where the funding comes from and what we spend it on. I think we just feel more comfortable from a optics standpoint, having an outside company handle the payroll, but also it does allow us to focus on some of those other things. So we get paid by ANCA and by Cdbg and Lcdc for doing things that we kind of specialize in, right? So administering grant funds and things like that. And that channel of money, while it's not huge, it kind of allows us to have a little bit of flexibility and okay, let's pay somebody else to do something else that they specialize in that we don't specialize in. And I think this is a good way to do that.
And I think this gets back to the ongoing conversation about, how we structure our budget going forward in terms of more staff, more of our own staff versus contracting out specialty items that, we may not be able to handle, or it doesn't make as much sense efficiency wise for us to handle in-house, even if we had additional staff. So,
Right.
so we'd actually be looking for a motion related to the first item, the payroll services.
Yes.
And that would,
I have a question. How much of a reduction is this from where we were a few months ago?
What was that quote? So over the summer, they did payroll and the bookkeeping. And that was only a 4 month?
Yeah, 4 months.
And that was for 4 months of their services.
Let me pull it
So Cheyenne's gonna look up what we paid. So the payroll services, the 1,930, that will be for the entire year.
and then basically $160 a month in that ballpark.
quick. Yes, and before it was $325 a month to have them do the billing as well.
Okay, so, okay. Okay, I just,
So about half of it.
Yeah, and that includes them preparing our quarterly taxes, tax returns and whatnot for the state and our federal filing. So it's just something they specialize in more. I can do it, but
Cheyenne's time can be spent elsewhere.
Yeah, I think for essentially $160 a month, we certainly have potentially more valuable things to be doing with that time.
Right.
Any other thoughts or questions? Would anyone like to make a motion to
Make it.
Ron, a second?
second,
Tom, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is the Cdbg grants and an update there.
Tongue twister. Okay, so I just shared on the screen here a summary of all of the Cdbg grant awards that we have out there right now. So for today's meeting, we need to approve the grants for Bodie Kombucha and the Bateman Draft House. But I wanted to give you an overview of all of the grants that we have out because of this program. In the Bateman Draft House with that small grant award, that's using up the last amount of grant funds that we have with this program. So we were able to impact 6 small businesses. Majority of them were food processing businesses, which was one of our priorities. Osceola Ski and Sport was a tourism-based business. Bodie Kombucha, they are a sister company to Skewed Brewing. So they have a bunch of different brands, or I guess lines, for their beverages. And they are purchasing a canning line with this grant fund. And they're actually going to be, I guess, growing their kombucha line and also canning their kombucha. But they're also going to rent this canning line out to Skewed Brewing and Tree Cake Cider, which are all their sister brands that they have under one roof. So Bodie Kombucha is for the purchase of a canning line with a grant amount of $34,000. The Bateman Draft House, this is the revitalization of the original bar in the Bateman building in downtown Lowville. Megan and Brandon Hellinger. Megan owns Drift Day Spa, which is also located in the Bateman. They're going to create a fine cocktail and craft beer bar and little eatery, focusing on only serving New York State craft beers and liqueurs and wines. So they are purchasing just miscellaneous kitchen and bar equipment. So I did provide you with the original approval, and just as of yesterday, that project kind of changed a little bit with their equipment. So the amount that we have left is $6,283. And originally they were going to receive $5,700. So there's just some things that have changed with their project, and we are going to grant them all that's left in that grant fund, which is about $6,300.
Yeah, and just a reminder, so we've, through this grant, there was a review committee set up of people from the community and different sectors to review these applications. So, and they had to meet certain income and employment criterias to qualify for these grants. And so we had this pot of money that I believe actually had to be used this year.
Yeah.
For grants to businesses that qualified based on their income and expected job creation. And all of these, as we've went along, have been reviewed by this stakeholder committee. So essentially what we're getting as a board is the recommendation of the committee to approve these.
Yep, all of these grants went through a program advisory committee where that committee scored the projects based on scoring criteria that we came up with. And then the applications went to a grant committee and they recommend approval for these grants. But like Joe said, this money has to be out by December. We will be asking for an extension from the state for the program because like Cummings Creamline Farm, Bateman Draft House, they just need Black River Valley Natural even, they just need a little bit more time to finish their project. So I'm not sure how long we'll extend it, maybe 4 or 5 months, just to give them enough time to finish their projects. So we do need approval for these 2 grants.
In general, I'm very much in favor of these things, but I guess I have a problem with the Bateman one. First place, as I count, I think we've got 6 or 7 bars already in Lowville. And I'm wondering if this bar is a big success and about all it's going to do is put one of the other ones out of business.
Well,
and I have other concerns too, because my daughter is the CFO of the company that owns the Bateman, and it's got low income housing in the top floor. And I question whether it's a good idea to have a bar downstairs from the people that live there, because they're not quite resistant to a bar, I don't think. So I guess I have some problems with this one.
so I will say that this project is different. I mean, this bar and restaurant is different than Baker's or Stosh's. This is a fine cocktail bar and craft beer bar. So they really only plan to sell New York State craft beers, which are a little bit more high end, a little bit pricier. New York State wine and spirits, which will also be a little bit more high end. I think the clientele and the targeted audience is very different. But again, this is one of our priorities of this project was businesses that are locating in a downtown. And this is a space that has been empty for years and years and years. And they're revitalizing this old bar. It's the original bar from years and years ago. It's a very cool space. And she did submit how they were going to adhere to the New York State COVID-19 guidelines. What's that? So I would say, Tom, like, I understand your concerns, but I think it's a completely different targeted audience than maybe what you're envisioning.
Well, I think, we hear that from the public, and we heard that with barkeeters in the past, that it was a different atmosphere and a different purpose to go there, and it was a different experience. Food people like to talk about experiences, right? And it's creating a different experience than what's available now. So
And I think if you look at the portfolio that we've spent this money on, granted this grant on, and the fact that the Bateman Draft House is receiving like the smallest portion, and the rest are very diverse in terms of the industries. I like that we're not just supporting, a bar or something like that. Even with the points that it is a different experience, it is a different demographic.
My experience with a bar like that, and I do have some, I used to attend bar many years ago, and it came clear to me that if the price of a certain beverage that somebody wanted to purchase was a nickel or a dime more than it was next door, most people will go next door. That's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's just an awful lot of competition already, and just one more might not work out too well.
Compare it to the Finger Lakes. So in the Finger Lakes, on those wine trails, there's how many different wineries? And there's wineries and distilleries that continue to pop up on those wine trails. Well, the Finger Lakes has made itself a destination because of the number of wineries and distilleries that are in that area. When we bring in more, like Joe said, more unique experiences into downtown Lowellville, that's going to bring more people to downtown Lowellville. It's going to give them more options. People go to Watertown because there's more options for restaurants and choices to eat. We want to be that destination here in downtown Lowellville that, okay, we have the option to go to Tony Harper's and Jeb's and the Bateman and even Stashes or Baker's. So it's helping when you think about downtown revitalization and bringing people into a downtown. We want those unique experiences. You want competition because it forces everyone to do better, to think differently, to think creatively, to continue to bring in clientele.
I would also add that this project is happening anyways.
And it's happening anyways.
Not that that's a reason to, just throw money at it by any means, but, I think it does align with the goals for downtown, and it is happening irregardless. And if we have the opportunity to, on a very small scale, support something that's does meet those downtown goals,
Right.
It's the rest of it is, the markets will do what they do, I guess. So. And to Cheyenne's point, if you look at the 6 projects and as a whole, it's we have there is a bit of a theme with food processing, but we or at least slash tourism, but it's a neat portfolio of projects that we've been able to lend a hand to because of the team's success in getting this grant for Lewis County. So I appreciate the discussion, and you know, certainly we still have to vote on it and see where it goes. But I think we have to balance out the you know, how it fits the objectives, how they, you know, score. I mean, if you look at the rankings that were sent out, I mean, I believe that this project got 98 points out of 100 from the grant review committee. So it's not like it was borderline in their opinion. So, you know, those are they're all important factors, and everyone's you know, it's good to have these discussions and make sure we know where we're going and what we're doing. But at the end of the day, we're at the step where we have to you know, make a decision and take into account the recommendations we've received from the committee, and if you still feel otherwise, then that's okay, I guess. But I think, you know, we can we'll probably need motions to do these separately, so we can start with the Budai kombucha one and then move on. And you know, if you have any thing to add, we can also put it into the record during the discussion and the vote. So so can we start with a motion for the kombucha company grant? Anyone like to make that?
I'll make it.
I'd go. Okay, I'd second it.
Okay, Ron, second by Tom. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, now on to the Bateman. Does anyone want to make a motion for that?
I'll make it.
Ron, a second.
I'll second it.
Goggin, any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. We had 4 in favor, 1 opposed. So thank you for the good discussion, and you know, good points made on that. But we'll hope for the best. All right. So the next thing on the list is our item that's been with us for many months now, and Brittany just put up a good, or whoever, Jenna just put up a good outline reminder for us here. But we are finally at a stage to look at adopting our revisions to the UTEP that address our solar policy. And there were some comments made by taxing jurisdictions that were shared with the board packet. Hopefully you had a chance to look at those. Are there any questions or comments related to the information shared and the comments from the taxing jurisdictions?
Joe, just a recap. So if we pass our UTEP today, we're going to continue to work with the county on the countywide solar process to really make sure that we nail that down, and we have something on our website. We do have a press release out there right now with a very informative flyer that Jenna created. So we will share that with the entire board. We created that flyer specifically for the concerns of some of the county legislators that we are taking landowner rights away, but in fact, we're really just trying to put more pressure on the developers. So on the screen is kind of our timeline of this entire UTEP process. And I really want to thank the board for sticking with this. And I want to thank Joe for really pushing for this type of policy to be adopted with the IDA. I know that he's been talking about this for probably 2 years now. So thank you, Joe, for pushing us to do this. In regard to the comments, at our last governance meeting last month, it was requested that Cheyenne do some analysis on the argument of should we be looking at this and charging by megawatt or by acreage. So Shy has put together an Excel sheet that she will explain her analysis of that to you all.
All right, and just kind of speaking from left to right here, so I wasn't really sure how to wrap my head around this as I progressed through these kind of little calculations until I got to the far right, and really what our intent might be in going to a per acre pilot amount. But starting in the right, the pilot on a megawatt basis, right now, the high end is 5,500 per megawatt as we have drafted in our UTEP. We know it takes about 5 acres for a megawatt of solar panels, and that gets us to about $1,100 per acre on a pilot if we try to convert what we have now to a per acreage price. Then I started thinking about if the project went forward with no pilot, we know that they assess these at about 1.2 million per megawatt, which if you run that down in a per acre model, and I'm using just a random parcel in Denmark for this analysis, just for a speaking point. It'd be slightly different for each township, for each type of land, but this is a vacant parcel in Denmark. Without a pilot, they'd be paying about $3,300 per acre in taxes. The underlying parcel, if there was no pilot, just the underlying parcel, as we get to the third kind of calculation there, works out to about $22.43 per acre in taxes. And knowing all of that, I got to, okay, so how do we talk about a pilot in a acreage / assessment basis? We could use a multiplier of that per acre in taxes amount. I know that's kind of what the developers are trying to avoid, is something that would fluctuate with the assessment. But if you chose, we want 50 times the taxes on the underlying parcel, that gets us about to where we're at now, that $1,100 per acre. And then just kind of thinking through what our intent might be and using that kind of model. Is it to try to drive the developer to not use as many acres, which I think that's part of maybe the intent, or at least get them to pay for the number of acres that they're using. And as we met with like Geronimo Energy, that's looking at that big project in Champion or Carthage, Wilna, Krogan, that area. And they talked about how the Beller Farm was very vocal in the fact that they didn't like this project. They were going to fight this project tooth and nail because it was consuming some of the land that they were renting for agriculture. And so, I mean, you take it with a grain of salt, but they're trying to work with the Bellers and use land that's maybe not as critical to Bellers, or work a deal so that the Bellers can have this other parcel that they're not currently using that's just as good or better if they can have the one that the Bellers are currently on. I think doing it on a per acre model allows less flexibility in that respect, because they're probably going to end up consuming more acres. And if they're doing a little bit here, a little bit there to try to kind of piece it all together, rather than just taking one large chunk of land. So I think that's definitely a risk, even though we would probably be able to drive that price per year up. We would want to be careful with that model, I think, in terms of what it does to how the developers are developing. Also, if we're trying to drive them towards more marginal land, I don't think a per acre model necessarily helps that. Any questions on that? I'd love some conversation on that.
As someone that's kind of right in the middle of this stuff, I think you're right on what you just said, because if you sort of try to push the developer to have less acres, they're going to want the very best land, basically. But where if you you go with lesser land, they might, I mean, it would take more acres, I believe, in that case to kind of do what they're trying to do. So I think you got the concept absolutely right there.
I keep thinking back to just residential development and what's more efficient. All these houses on 1 acre parcels of road frontage dotting the countryside, or a planned housing development. At the end of the day, you could take 41 acre parcels and put them into a 40 acre development, and you gain efficiency both in municipal support, water, sewer, road, all that stuff, and you're less disruptive to the landscape because you've consolidated it to one place versus all these parcels that are fragmenting our agricultural land. That's really essentially where some of the agricultural zoning and farm, right to farm stuff started with back in whenever, 40, 50 years ago or wherever, right? And I feel like we're facing the same thing today, is that if the county is interested in having a certain number of acres allocated to solar development, the more concisely and targeted we can do that, then it's going to be more efficient and less fragmentation of the landscape. So now the counter to that is where a big project does happen, is exactly what we were talking about. Who does that displace when a big project does happen? So I think that gets back to this process in general, trying to drive the process to areas where it displaces the least valuable land as possible, right? So I think this is really interesting to look at, and it does raise some questions, but I think I would tend to agree with Cheyenne and Tom at the end of the day that it could actually have some unintended consequences.
And Joe, if I'm understanding you right, you would kind of rather see large projects happen, say 100 megawatt project happen, because it's going to need to be at least in the same general vicinity, than 25 megawatt projects dotted all over Lewis County.
Well, yeah, to me, the 25 megawatt projects just are much more disruptive and at the end of the day, less efficient. Now that, again, that's a challenge, like that could be 20 landowners benefiting instead of 1 or 2 landowners benefiting. So there is a give and take there for sure. But I just think we have to, it's also part of our responsibility to think about the total disruption that is going to happen to the county as a whole and the efficiency of this. Part of why we're driving renewable energy is for better efficiency and a lower carbon footprint, right? Well, we're going to, even from the developer's standpoint, we get a project has a lower footprint if you're more efficiently using the resources to deliver more energy to the grid from a single project than a whole bunch of little ones that have repetitive use of resources, right?
The larger projects actually waste a lot less land because you have these pretty large setbacks, and basically, I mean, the setback for a 20 or 30 acre one wouldn't be a whole lot more land use than, I mean, if you had three little ones, you still got all that setback. So you're going to be a lot more efficient with land use on larger ones.
So all that being said, I think our UTEP was probably going down the right road in terms of how we were addressing it.
I think this was a healthy discussion for sure, and part of doing our due diligence just to make sure we are going down the right path. And it's not that we can't change it in the future, right? I mean, these are living documents that we may find that need to be tweaked going forward. But I think it does, these sort of exercises give us more confidence in moving forward.
Yeah, and I will say, I was on a call a couple days ago with some state representatives and some other planning directors, county managers across the state in regard to the new siting regulations for these large projects. And it was really interesting. The Niagara County manager was on the line, and he talked about their IDA's new policy, which is very similar to ours in that any project that's not located on a brownfield site and increases in megawatt, the pilot increases. So they had very significant increases and much higher pilot cost per megawatt that I'm not sure if that policy is even going to work, but it's good to hear that other IDAs are thinking like this. Again, there's no guidance from the state, and every county is going to do it differently. So I think our draft UTEP as we have it now, it's a good starting point. And I think we just need to adopt it, and if we need to tweak it in the future, we can. In regard to some other comments, the town of Lowville, they were kind of under the impression or thought that any changes in our UTEP should be approved by affected taxing jurisdictions. That's not the case. We simply just have to give them time to provide comment back to us. So I don't know if you guys had any other questions on the comments received. We've tried to address all of the questions and comments that have come our way. I think we've given ample time for receiving comments. So I think our next step is to adopt.
Before you go to that step, I wanted to say two things, if you don't mind.
Yep.
First of all, to go back to Joe's point that this is an evolving or living document, it's actually the IDA's obligation to review this document annually and reapprove it annually. So it's anticipated right in the state statute that this is something that evolves. So it's not written in stone for sure. And the second thing, I really wanted to go back to, I think, a comment that Darlene made some time ago about not really having, I guess, a background or as to what the IDA does and how they do it. And Darlene, I would just recommend that this UTEP, not necessarily just the solar part, but the whole UTEP is a really good summary of the benefits that the IDA can provide to projects. And it has criteria in there that the projects are supposed to meet. It's a really good sort of a summary of the benefits that the IDA can provide and why certain projects are eligible for those benefits. So you might just want to take a read through it and try to soak it up.
Thanks for that.
So if there's no other, thank you for that, Kevin. And if there's no other questions, we were provided with the language of the document. And if we're ready to move forward, we do need a roll call vote, I believe, to approve it. So unless anyone has anything else they'd like to bring up beforehand, we'll look for a motion to approve this.
To me, this is
I'll make it.
moving in the right direction, and if Ron made the motion, I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion from Ron, a second from Tom. Any discussion? Yeah, I would just like to echo what's been shared by our partners in the county and even folks that Brittany has talked to outside of the county. I think the amount of effort and time we've put into this is to be commended, and I really am confident that while it is a living document and we'll likely learn and adapt as we go, that we have a really great point to work from here. And I think it's going to really enhance our ability to, specifically address solar development in a responsible way. And so I'd like to thank everyone for all the thought and discussion and ideas that they've put into it. So with that, we'll take a roll call vote. We'll start with Tom.
Yes.
Ron.
Yes.
Darlene.
Yes.
Goggin.
Yeah.
Joe, yes. Jerry is excused. All right. With that, the motion carries, and thank you everyone for their hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's exciting.
All right. Lost my place on the agenda.
We're at our discussion items. So we just have two discussion items today. So first is our strategic plan update. So again, I want to thank the board for sticking with this throughout the course of the year. This was a really neat process to be involved in. I was very pleased at the end of our last session a couple of weeks ago, and the completion of our strategic priorities. Does anyone have any follow-up thoughts after our last session and the strategic priorities that we have come up with? I had mentioned to Christy after the session that there's no way that we would have ever come to those strategic priorities without going through this process. Because I think when we always think strategic plan, we think of the specific action items and the operational items that should be our strategies. But really it's about the overarching umbrella of developing partnerships and the policies, the research education, outreach and visibility, and then the strategic funding development. So I'm I have a sense of clarity, and I think we as a team have a sense of clarity of where we need to go from here. So just next steps for the strategic plan. As Christy mentioned, this is where the work does begin. So we're going to have a couple of sessions here as a team to really talk about, okay, here's our strategic priorities. Here's our 3-year initiatives, and then coming up with our 2021 goals that fall under each of those strategies. So I think it's good timing, seeing as though we're at the end of 2020, and we can soon present some of those operational pieces with the strategic plan. I do want to mention, can you scroll up to the statement? In talking with Christy, when she sent this document to us, we did tweak the first paragraph just a little bit. So if you can see, we changed it to Lewis County Economic Development through its board, the IDA, and its brand, Naturally Lewis, are championing the growth. So what it was saying before was that Naturally Lewis was championing the growth, when in reality, it's our organization, it's our board, and it's our team here that's championing the growth. And then we had a big discussion on what do we want to be called in the community. We don't really want to be known as the IDA to the community because it's very limiting and it's kind of old school. So going to, we are Lewis County Economic Development. Our board is the LCIDA board, and our brand is the Naturally Lewis brand. Is that okay with everyone? Does that make sense?
To me, it gets at the breadth of things that we're trying to address.
Right. So again, going back to next steps, we're going to have a couple of sessions here with the team to kind of lay out the whole chart of what are the initiatives and what are our 2021 goals. What we're going to do in December, in combination with our budget process, for our finance committee meeting in December, we're actually going to hold a budget workshop. We're kind of doing it like the county does. We're going to hold a budget workshop session where we will present a draft budget and what we're thinking in relation to our strategic plan. So here are our goals for 2021. Here's how we should spend our money in relation to our strategic plan. So what we'll do is we'll set a date for December, and we'll have a draft budget and our draft strategic plan with our 2021 goals. Any questions on that?
Not a question, but a comment I'd like to just add is, it was about 1 year ago that I started the process of interviewing for this board position. And at the time, I didn't have that clear understanding of the different entities within the organization and the roles that they played. And through this process, it's really helped me to better identify and understand each different area. So I think as we're looking to explain this out in the community, I think that as someone who's the newest to, the board, I do think that's what this has done. I think the process has been very beneficial. And as we look to fill another seat, I think we've done good work of of really identifying the organization and its goals. So thank you for organizing that.
Thanks, Darlene.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. You know, anytime we get new board members or we meet with a new partner or we meet with a business, this is something that we can give to them and say, here's what we're focused on. We're very clear on our strategies and our goals, and that allows us to say yes to some projects, or, you know, this isn't really in our ballpark. Maybe this entity can take on that role. So yeah, I think it brings a sense of clarity. And again, thank you to everyone for sticking through this process.
And I don't want to embarrass Brittany, but you know, and I don't want to downplay the COVID pandemic either, but in the theme of trying to make lemonade out of lemons type of thing, you know, Brittany said we weren't, you know, she's not sure if we would or we wouldn't have gotten here without this process, which I agree with. It's been a great process. Frankly, after the discussion at our last couple planning sessions, I'm not sure if we would have gotten to such a good point with this process without the pandemic. And I would just like to acknowledge Brittany's growth and work, you know, coming on, taking on the new leadership responsibilities less than a year ago, and then being hit with this. And, you know, I think, Brittany, your growth has been tremendous through this. And I think the, you know, perhaps we wouldn't be at the same place and as good of a place in this strategic planning process if it hadn't have been for the things we've encountered and had to adapt and learn in the last 6 months or so. So I just wanted to throw that in too.
Thank you, Joe.
I'd like to concur that I agree 100%.
Thanks, Tom.
And everyone on the team. But
Yeah, we're building a really great team with our board and staff, that we're just, great things are going to happen with our organization. So thank you all.
all right, so we'll look forward to putting this document into action, and know that we have the abilities to do that. So.
Perfect.
So lastly was partnership updates regarding the Lcdc.
So as I had mentioned, we have done quite a bit with the Lcdc this past month, and you know, we continue to talk about why should we utilize the Lcdc more than we have in the past. And in regard to Kevin's comment before, this is just a very general chart of the key roles of IDAs versus LDCs. I think one of the biggest things is that LDCs just have a little bit more flexibility with their funds. So as an IDA, you know, we can buy and sell property, we can, you know, provide incentives, but we really can't do loans or grants with our own money. So that's why some of these projects that I'll be hitting on and talking about, that's why we decided to use the Lcdc for these projects. So if you want to go to the Winter Design Challenge, I sent you all an email on Monday that talked about our Winter Design Challenge. So this was a project idea that came out of the Winter Industry Roundtable event. Sorry. Was to find grant funding for tourism, entertainment, hospitality businesses to help strengthen their outdoor experiences. So whether that be expand their outdoor dining into the winter months, whether it be a creative service solution to help them accommodate more customers. It could be the creation of fire pits. I mean, we're really allowing the businesses to get creative here. So what the LCDC did, we applied for $10,000 through the Pratt Northam COVID-19 Community Impact Fund. We were awarded. And then in turn, the county matched $10,000 for this project. So we have $20,000 to accept proposals from businesses in this industry that will provide a project plan on a creative solution to help, increase capacity, increase space so that they can accommodate more customers. I think the biggest concern that came out of this was all the restaurants and bars on Tug Hill, they're typically jam-packed with snowmobilers in the winter. Well, that obviously cannot happen. So can they put up a tent with some outdoor heaters or put in some fire pits to just accommodate more tourists and more customers throughout the winter? So businesses have until November 20th to submit proposals to us. We're going to have a scoring committee that includes a county rep, the director of the Pratt Northam Foundation, LCDC board members, IDA staff, and chamber staff. We will be reviewing these proposals. Hopefully we will have awards by December 1st. We're awarding 50% up to $1,000 for projects. And we're hoping that businesses get really creative in their proposals. So this is a cool project. We're really excited about it. It's going to be a really quick turnaround. But we will be launching it tomorrow. So if you talk to any business that could use these funds, please send them our way. Any questions on that program? Okay, and then secondly, the LCDC did have a board meeting this month, and they made a motion to be the host of the Community Economic Development Fund that we continue to talk about with renewable energy projects as a host benefit separate agreement with some of these solar projects. So they are going to start that process. We talked with Joe Scott, who is our attorney for the No. 3 wind project, and he is in agreement with assisting the LCDC through that process as well. So just wanted to give you an update that that community fund is moving forward with the LCDC.
All right, thank you for those.
Question, is there any timeline on getting the paperwork for the community fund done, or?
No timeline yet. I think we need to nail down some of the program details, and I think the LCDC will need to work with the attorney on some of the legal items and agreements, I guess.
Yeah, No. 3 is ramping up. So I think it's kind of a two-pronged approach at this point for the LCDC. They need to have the attorney draft something developer facing. So draft something to Invenergy saying we want an HCA. And also at the same time be figuring out the details of what that money is going to go towards.
Yep. Yep. All right, that's all we got.
All right, so thanks for those updates. So we actually, because of the format of the meeting today being virtual, we did have executive session potential item related to contract negotiations and the business of the Duke Energy project in southern Lewis County. And after talking it through and how to handle this, Brittany came up with the solution that since no actions are needed related to that, it's an update on the project, that we would actually close our meeting and then have return to an executive session for that update. Does that make anything to add, Brittany or Kevin?
That's correct. Yep.
So we would look for a motion to close the regular meeting, and then we will look to open an executive session for that update.
I make that motion to close.
Darlene, have a second?
Second.
Don? Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.